This is Cybersound, your simplified and fundamentals-focused source for all things cybersecurity, with your hosts, Jason Pufahl and Stephen Maresca.
Welcome to Cybersound. I'm your host, Jason Pufahl. Today, joined, as usual, by Steve Maresca and Matt Fissaro. And we've got a special guest today, Max Lamouth Broussard, the founder of Lima Charlie. Max, if I'm right, you've got a pretty long background in sort of intelligence. You worked at CrowdStrike. You worked at Google, right? So you've been in this information security and data analytics and threat analytics space for a long time.
I've never done anything else. That's right.
that makes you feel good. No other interest in that.
Very similar here too.
Yeah, some days it feels that way for sure. Max, spend a couple minutes. Give us an overview of Lima Charlie. I think set the stage a little bit maybe for some of this incident response and automation talk we're going to have.
Sure thing. What we do is we essentially take a security infrastructure approach to cybersecurity tools. So what that means is everything we offer is self-serve, scale up, scale down, multi-tenant, API first, OEM friendly, drop a credit card kind of thing, like you'd use AWS, really. So that's the foundation. And then we have primitives on top of that. So primitives for us is, EDR, the ability to ingest artifacts from endpoints. So that could be like forensic artifacts, could be memory dumps, like all that kind of stuff. Ingest external logs from other sources, even other EDRs, so we can bring their data in. Where we have, an engine to run rules over that, do retention, do visualization, all that good stuff. So it's really kind of taking, a bunch of the tools that have been in cybersecurity for a long time and saying, well, what if each individual tool wasn't, a boxed thing that you buy and that you have to just use that way, but instead it was like AWS, right? Like APIs and being able to just integrate it all together.
So here, I'm going to really boil it down to its most basic, because I think, Matt, you and I were chatting and you said it's a tool for developers who write tools, right? And I think, because we're always looking for ways to improve our processes to make the work that we're doing sort of faster, more repeatable, more scalable. I think that, in a large part, that's what you're trying to build, right? A framework to allow people to actually sort of automate and improve what they do on a daily basis.
That's right. It's kind of taking the learnings from the DevOps side of things, right? And like IT, and saying, hey, let's try to, there's some really good ideas in there. Let's try to adopt those and just make it easier to get into the ecosystem as well, right? Which for incident response is a pretty big thing where, when you don't have to call up 3 different salespeople and talk over the next 2 months to get a 3-year contract. Like, it's just drop a credit card, you just get going.
Right.
So this is near and dear to our heart, I think, because I joke regularly that security tools and platforms are sort of the realm of broken dreams and unfulfilled promises, which is maybe unfair, but, the data representations are all different across vendors, despite attempts to unify some sort of standardized representation. The timelines, data retentions are all different, and we inevitably need to glue things together, sometimes on the fly, especially during incident response, in ways that are inelegant but get the job done. So it's, we're always trying to chase that elegant approach and sometimes unable to reach it.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and I think it's going to get better too, right? We have things like Sigma, and like the industry is, we're not alone to see that. I think the industry is also kind of, coming up and doing things like Sigma and MITRE, and then slowly we're getting to this common way of seeing the landscape of cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's been nice to see over the past couple of years how that's kind of coming together. Tools consolidating and quite honestly, just making frameworks that work well together. That, kind of what Steve was talking about earlier. Yeah, it's near and dear to us because we come from a networking background. Those were our first kind of working experiences, right? And moving into security was pretty easy for the two of us. And when we did, we saw the problems, right? that all the tools, they don't work very well together. It's really difficult to get data from one thing to another. When we were building a tool, that was kind of our chief concern, right? We wanted to make sure that anything that we were using, we could send to somebody else so that they could use it as well, right? I think that was lost on a lot of the initial companies that started creating security products, right? They really wanted to own the whole landscape, be that one solution, and it didn't really work very well.
Yeah, exactly. I think, the way that I see this, I think it's a problem that the best way to solve it is not to try to, meaning let's not pretend that somehow we're the only kid on the block, and therefore that the one format we have is going to be the universal thing and try to get everybody to come on board. I think an approach that I've really liked and that we've liked, and we've seen other people do really cool stuff like Times, that we did a webinar with them recently, has kind of been to say, look, the deep model is not going to be unified, but if we can at least agree on kind of very, very basic fundamentals like JSON, and we can all agree that the way we're going to intercommunicate is going to be through something like JSON, so that at least it's not the one, the utopia of like one model to rule them all, but at the very least, you're not blocked by the vendor. Because back in the day, that'd be great. There's this one model, but you got to file a ticket with the vendor and wait 6 months. Maybe they'll add the conversion, blah, blah, blah. So if it's JSON, at least you can know that at the end of the day, you're going to be able to move forward without the vendor,
Because
I agree there.
So for all practical matters, if you're in the field trying to use different vendors with different APIs, you will actually need to use multiple languages that aren't necessarily compatible with each other and do translations between different protocols, different data representations. I think that's the crux of it. You're trying to reduce that individual overhead or the team overhead to make better use of platforms in a way that's not so painful to actually get the basics achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're getting there.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of drew me to what you guys were building was the opportunity to save time, right? We talked about it on a previous podcast, how engineer burnout is a real problem, right? And we're always looking for ways to make our lives easier, frankly. This seems to have that ability to save some time, right? Put some automation in front of things. I know that when we go and do incident response, or even just some of our clients that are more in a SOC type engagement, even little things can take a long time to investigate, to figure out root causes. Even just deploying tools sometimes can be a real pain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's, I think there as an incident responder or somebody doing security, right, there's like a hierarchy of value, I guess, to put a really, I feel dirty saying that.
It sounds good though when you say it, right?
Yeah, that's right. And negotiating with a vendor is really, really low in that value stack. Or standing up an ELK cluster and getting JSON into that, again, it's really low. So that's what we try to focus on, right? We're not, I think that's the other part that I really enjoy about what we do is we're not an incident response shop. We're not an MSSP. We're not a threat intel company. We really just, aim for all those things that aren't really high on that hierarchy of value of what you guys do. And we just try to take those away make it easy for you. And what that means is we just end up in this really kind of great relationship with all our users where, when you go and you deploy at a customer, like we're just, like we've got your back, and it's not like we're, competing, or we've got other side businesses where we try to get in and all these things. Like at the end of the day, when you do an engagement, if it doesn't work out, and you're month to month, like we know right away. So we really like having this relationship where we're just trying to take the things that are not fun out of your job.
The not fun part. I'm trying to think of if you could take all the not fun parts out of my job, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I always think back. I used to not so much like real incident, like modern incident response, but I've done a lot of, sort of MDR kind of space, and there's a lot of fun in there. Like
right.
There's a lot of really cool stuff to do, and if you can abstract away those not fun parts, doing threat hunting, I don't think I've ever done anything as fun in my life as that. So,
right. Yeah, the routine parts of trying
by the time you get there, you're exhausted, right?
That's right.
Because you just spent 48 hours trying to deploy software to a client that actually can't support mass deployments. So, things like that are just the drudgery.
Yeah, that's going to be happening less and less, I hope, right?
Fingers crossed. But until then, we still dwell in the realm of masochism to some degree. I'm interested to hear a little bit about problems being solved. What specific stories do you have that are likely to resonate on that front?
Sure. I think we get a lot of folks using us for incident response. So there's a lot of stories, and the one thing we've learned is, by working with a lot of different like MSSPs and IR firms and all that, is everybody's a little bit different. But what I really enjoy is talking to some folks that have been able to cut down a lot of that, and I'll put forward a scenario, like a representative scenario, right, of how a lot of IR folks use it. So they're able to they get a phone call from somebody, and like some of them have like 30-minute SLAs, so it's really like the clock's really ticking when they're online. And what they've been able to do with Lima Charlie is they've been able to say, hey, let's think about what we do when we do an IR in terms of like a well-established process, right? Let's not just jump into it, but rather when we get an IR, we need to deploy. Here's the things we need from that customer. Here's the order that we want to look at various things. Here's the things that we always want to happen when we get onto those customers. And so they've been able to kind of think about that, and then they do their first IR with Lima Charlie, and they go in and they do the thing, and they check all the boxes. They run the IR, and then at the end we're able to we kind of show them how to, but to say all the things that you did, all that configuration stuff, you can kind of take it away and export it into a config file. Infrastructure as code. It's kind of the big DevOps, Terraform kind of thing, so that their second IR, instead of going and configuring all the things, going through a checklist, spending an hour, okay, now we have to go and collect those types of files from the customer and like synchronize with their IT team and all that. They're able to just go like push that config file to their Lima Charlie tenant, so that their first step, is deploying like the agent, right, when it's EDR. But then all the steps after, all the stuff that's always the same, is just automated. So the classic is, they'll go and they'll say, okay, we want to collect every single raw Windows event log from the whole organization. Like we do a sweep. And so that they just automate that very simply. And they have rule sets, right? They use things like Sigma to look for anomalies or bad things in those logs. And so as those artifacts come in, raw Windows event logs get parsed automatically. We alert, the rules run on them. So they just get alerts like that. That's their only interaction. And then they go, okay, we also want live real-time Windows event logs. And so that's set up in the config. So they don't have to do anything. As soon as they deploy, they just start streaming with real-time Windows event logs. And then there's Sigma rules that, where on like the raw logs now operate on that as well. And so they kind of build up that stack over time, where they go like, whenever we go to, a customer and, we detect that type of compromise, like, there's an auto run with an unsigned binary, we always just, isolate the box from the network and then tag it with isolated, so that like we, quickly are able to identify that. And so they're just able to kind of start implementing that, not as a checklist, but as a like push button go kind of thing.
Yeah, I could see that bringing a lot more consistency to the process too, right? And that's a tough thing in this industry too. You're trying to get junior people involved in something complicated like incident response. This is a good way to do that, right? So you already have your processes kind of, like you say, in code, right? So that can definitely make this much more accessible to people that may not have the experience to know. But like your example, right? We do this all the time with this particular situation. Well, put it in a rule, and we don't have to teach that to every single responder, right?
That's right. For newers, but even for senior like responders, I think it's useful because like the what was it the Mark 1 eyeball is just not that reliable, right? Especially when you get called at like 4 a.m. and you're just like looking for the unsigned things in the process list. Just the machine should be doing that for you, right? Like you take the output of that and then you reason about it. That's where you're adding that value.
Right. That's that analyst role, right? You want somebody who can legitimately look at it and make some determinations out of the complex data.
Well, what I want to see here, instead of sticking in the incident response discussion, is shifting to operational security. We have customers that want to take anomaly events from their network traffic traversing internal networks and block them immediately in internal firewalls. They want to disable accounts automatically that are behaving in a way that's different from their typical baseline. Those are the be-all, end-all, rarefied destinations of information security when applied appropriately. It's just challenging to get there because of all of the hurdles that need to be vaulted in between. And I imagine to some degree outside of incident response, you're seeing those outcomes as well to make things more efficient operationally.
Absolutely. And I think you kind of hit on the key, which is those are, those are kind of the end destinations. But the reality is that to get there in a cookie cutter way, I don't think it's going to happen. Like, I'm just going to go and say it, like every organization is different. And, on that one customer, it turns out that, the CEO uses like that part of the network. And if it gets blocked down, he's going to get mad. And, all types of unique ways or unique setups. Like IT is just not too complicated, but it's just so complicated nowadays that this whole box product approach, it's gonna diminishing returns. So I think that's where it's really important for vendors to kind of realize that those external things are going to be needed, and they're going to have to be customized, and they are the first class feature of having that flexibility really has to be there, right? So that's why for us, it has meant things like the ability to stage payload, right? That was one of the really big things in IR, but as well as in other types of response, like how we do memory dump, which is the idea that I have this executable, or I have this MSI or this shell script, and it knows how to do things that are not kind of LC Lima Charlie native. But I still want to be able to integrate that into my automation and deploy them at scale and do things very easily and in a controlled way. And so that's why we added some of those features, because they're kind of points where we made the very clear distinction. Like we know exactly what's happening everywhere, but at this point, now it's up to you, right? Like you have the keys. We're not preventing you, but you have the keys to go and do the things that you needs to be done.
Getting to, because I think it's important to draw the distinction, right? Like automated activities, say during incident response, are one thing. Automation of blocks or other controls just during the normal course of business from disparate sources of information, right? Making inferences from your log correlation tool and your SIM tool and your IDS. Well, I mean, it's so difficult. And almost, I don't know that we've run across a client that is mature enough to truly be able to take those, I guess you call them proactive actions, right? When there's an event that's correlated across a variety of systems, block something. It's so prone to false positives. It's very difficult for people to feel comfortable doing that. But there's tremendous value here in sort of, improving the efficiency of engineers and making a lot of those sort of more routine tasks a lot easier to do, right? I mean, the ultimate goal, of course, is that orchestration and automation for your real-time security. I don't think we have one customer that's in a position to be able to do that.
Some try. I mean, to your point, Max, it will produce an outcome that is not desirable in many occasions.
Right.
But increasing the signal and reducing the noise is the ultimate prior goal, because then at least you can have more efficient review by your upper tier analysts and avoid the legwork and drudgery of getting to that point.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think that's how we get there, right? That utopia where, like, we automate these really complex things across many different sources. I think we're on the road to that. But the way I see it is, as an industry, it goes back a little bit to the whole XDR thing, but we got to take it one step at a time and learn as an industry, like, hey, how do you do this? How do you reason about this? And so the first step is, like, okay, we're going to want to make decisions on a bunch of different data sources. Okay, let's start by having an easy way to bring all those data sources, and then we're going to start to look at, across them, what does data look like? How can we automate getting signal from that? And then over time, I think it's, as an industry, we're going to get to the point where, look, we've done this, we've crawled long enough that we get a pretty good idea of what are the things that make sense for us to try to automate that way, or what are the real signals that we need, because it's entirely possible that what's needed, we just don't have it today. I think we're a lot of vendors are kind of taking all of these data sources and kind of throwing them in a bucket and just kind of sort of eyeballing plausible scenarios that how you could correlate this and block something. But the delta between those plausible scenarios and the real life is there's a lot of road to be done.
There are very few events generated by a platform that indicate confidence level. And there are very few platforms that generate multiple streams of data to validate conclusions or assertions made in an event. And I think that's the crux of it sometimes. Decisions are made inappropriately based on single data points, when in reality they may have false positives easily determined with some supplemental context, or alternatively, determined to be a false negative. So it cuts both ways, and better data always produces better outcomes, generally speaking, as long as it can be reasoned appropriately and efficiently.
Mm-hmm. I think that's where it's so exciting. For me, it's very exciting to look at, the type of system you kind of just described, and kind of, make a hypothesis of what's that system going to look like. And, I would be surprised if machine learning didn't somehow come into play for that. But I think that's where machine learning and cybersecurity really truly is going to, come into its own. It's when we get to those higher level, decision making, that are just a lot more complex. And when we have hundreds of different solutions, like different streams coming in, I don't think we know what that system is right now. We're gonna get there.
So I think we're over our normal time here. So I kind of want to be respectful to our typical podcast format. Max, anything that you want to say sort of in closing, or if there's one message you want to get out, anything you want to try to say here?
Yeah, that message is that, from our perspective, everybody's welcome. I think we're part of a new generation of cybersecurity tools that tries to empower, really, and to do that in an easy way. So, get in touch if you have ideas. You're excited about the idea of where that's leading in AWS, like a cybersecurity kind of thing. Get in touch. We just love chatting with people.
Yeah. I feel like my takeaway listening to this is we're all on a team of sort of the good guys here, and you're pushing a platform of sort of interoperability and cooperation, which I think I think the security space needs. We're starting to see the space mature some. I think the ability to utilize disparate tools to some degree, right? Maybe this sounds grandiose, but for the greater good, I think is important. So, and I think you're on that path with what you're doing, and I say I appreciate that. So, Matt, Steve, anything in conclusion?
I like where this vision you have is going. I hope to see a lot more companies doing it. I like the open nature and the kind of hey, here's the platform. Come use it. Let it speak for itself, and do something nice with it. Right.
As tool builders ourselves, it's always sort of encouraging and enlightening to see others take what we don't have the time to do. So we appreciate that as well.
There you go. What I needed to do is actually, if you're going to take the bad parts of my job, it needs to be able to read and respond to my email. So if you can develop that, that would be hugely helpful. So Max, thanks for joining today. I appreciate it. I think it's been an interesting podcast. As always, I think the listener base is probably a little bit different for this one. So if people have comments or questions, reach out to us at Vancord on LinkedIn or Vancord Security on Twitter. We're happy to have a follow-up conversation. Certainly bring Max back if there's interest. And as always, we hope you got some value out of this, and have a great day.
Stay vigilant. Stay resilient. This has been Cybersound.